Carmelita, finally reminding me of her unintuitive name, learns that the emerald is here and says that unless the bad guy has proof of ownership, she'll have to confiscate that emerald for a case she's working on. So they're going with the realistic thing, where a random person isn't allowed to have an emerald just because they found it. That's more realistic than Breezy getting to keep a Chaos Emerald in the reboot. He suspiciously agrees, probably planning something. Since she made it clear to him that her main goal is catching Sly, since he knows it's here, she's told it would be smarter to leave the emerald here and ambush Sly when he comes back. She actually agrees, even though you think it would be illegal for her to not confiscate the emerald he has no proof he owns immediately. I thought she'd be a by-the-books cop, considering how she absolutely hates Sly no matter how polite he is. But it makes sense for her character that she'd do literally anything it takes to catch Sly. Sally reassures Sly back at home that they made some real progress today, even though they did nothing but confirm what they already knew, that an emerald was there. They could have not gone there, and they would have gone there tomorrow anyways and found it anyways. So that was all just a waste of time. He gets reassured anyways and decides to tell Bentley he was right. Sally embarrasses him a little by telling Bentley about Sly's plot based on a newspaper in the wind, and Bentley snarks about that a little, finally acting like a longtime companion of his again. At least he's not constantly acting like an arrogant, insufferable genius, like most of what I've seen of him in Sly 1. He seems tolerable here. He warns them not to scratch the rental van. Sly explains that they had lost their actual van, and thought that remodeling a van to look like it would make them feel better, but it didn't. In the end, Bentley kept having trouble and locked himself in his room as soon as the job was done. Sally says it just needs time to readjust to things, and thinks he and Bentley will reconcile and be as good as new once he's ready for the mission, as apparently Sally's optimistic now. She tells him goodnight. Wasn't it just morning? It seems like the days go by extremely quickly with Sly. We're never told, with even a passing line, what she does all day when she's waiting for night. I have to assume that she just watches TV, but that could have been so easy to explain. I mean, how would they get TV? She could read books, was my first thought. Sally goes to bed, has a really bad headache, and out of nowhere, her dream has something brand new happen in it. Hooray. Mecha Sally somehow makes it all the way to the Nanite City, instead of being grabbed and held still by Silver's telekinesis, and never let go, which is obviously what would happen, since Silver went to the Death Egg. Anyways, after that impossibility, Ixis finally tries to be useful and crystallize her, though I wish he didn't call her traitorous. He says that if he releases her, she'll rampage again. Sonic says that if that happens, he can stop her. Ixis openly says that if he releases her, maybe he'll be able to get Sonic court-martialed or banished for this. It's oddly refreshing to see him be outright honest with Sonic to his face about his evil plan against him. That's kinda humorous, actually. He's being self-aware. He says again, and then Sonic sees Reboot Sally in front of him, who asks who she is and where she is, even though you'd think she would have remembered being Mecha Sally and think that she was still her. Especially since the reason Sally remembered everything she did as Mecha Sally after being deroboticized is that she still technically had free will to a point, and just wasn't able to disobey Eggman. So if her brain is smarter than most Robians as Mecha Sally, why doesn't she remember being Mecha Sally now? So Mecha Sally got deroboticized, and somehow Ixis made it happen by accident. Which I guess makes sense to happen by accident because he accidentally deroboticized Bunny too because of his confusing wizards in his head illness, even though none of the wizards in his head would want that. Maybe that's why he's saying again. In retrospect, I don't like the idea that Ixis did it instead of Sonic getting to earn a major victory by attacking her and throwing her into the deroboticizer. So while it does make sense that Ixis' derobotization power will be used again because it's a Chekhov's gun, well, I'm not sure we were told in actual Archie Sonic that the heroes were working on a deroboticizer at home. All I remember us seeing was Rotor's team defending the city. But yeah, I'd rather the heroes earn a major victory. But I can respect this because this is realistic too. And when she's deroboticized, she looks like Reboot Sally, because that's what Flynn wanted in the first place. So ironically, this comic is, for once, more loyal to Flynn than Archie Sonic Online, which just returned Sally to what she looked like before she was deroboticized. which makes more sense because of the bioanalyzer thing. And her being successfully deroboticized instead of dying from it because her heart isn't there because it was replaced with something else. Makes sense because it was just a wizard who deroboticized her. So it makes sense for the same reason that Bunny's limbs being deroboticized made sense, when they weren't her original ones to begin with. It's magic. I'm just saying it's lucky for her that the deroboticization spell decided to give her clothes like this, that she never actually wore before. Realistically, you think she wouldn't have any clothes right now, because she had just turned organic. How the deroboticization beam know to summon clothes? Like, know what parts of her to turn to clothes? Well, the dark blue part of Sally's upper chest when she's Mecha Sally does seem to be more in front of her torso than the gray part of her body. I guess if there's extra metal protruding from her body, it's turned into clothing from having no roboticized skin cells on it with DNA. Like, obviously the clothes would be roboticized too by a roboticizer. That's always how it works. So the deroboticizer accounts for that. Because, obviously, clothes are made of organic material too. Just not skin material. Like yarn and cloth are made from stuff from sheep. So that makes sense. If it's metal that doesn't have any roboticized skin cells and is literally just normal metal, then it gets turned into cloth, because it's got no DNA in it. So Reboot Sally is confused and said she can see flashes of images, but it's like seeing memories of a stranger. So if she can see flashes of any image, so she can remember some things, but not everything about being Mecha Sally? Huh? That makes even less sense. Sonic hugs her as they both look sweet, and he says he'll be happy to get her memories back. She thanks Sonic, and somehow Sally's still horrified when she wakes up. She insists on calling that harmless looking girl an it, and says she's stealing her life, and cries about it. Even though she's gonna go home in like days anyways. Well, for all she knows, Mecha Sally was just playing dumb and having an act so that she could catch Sonic off guard later. It doesn't entirely make sense that just because she's turned organic, she's free of Eggman's programming. Because Ixis doesn't really like her, so why would it spell turn her good as well? She was always in favor of Eggman. Because she was never Sally, she was the roboticizer turned into Mecha Sally. The spell turned her back to normal, but that was never normal for her. It's confusing because she seems completely innocent, luckily. So I would expect Sally to recognize that and just be happy that her friends don't have to be miserable about her being a robot anymore. At least she corrected herself and did call Mecha she. Meanwhile, Carmelita can't get reception and gets grabbed by a big goon and says that she was right that Dr. M wasn't trustworthy. So she was actually smart enough to not trust him. She smacks the goon with a fire extinguisher and easily knocks him out and escapes his grip. Then she passes out because it turns out some invisible gas was knocking her out the whole time. That was clever. How did he measure her weight beforehand so he'd know how much was too much and how little was too little? I guess he got some guy to do it. So the bad guy says to take her to the party room when she's asleep, and thinks that she'll be lucky if she even remembers anything that happened today. And he wants to keep working on his gift for when the guests arrive. Did he send a goon after her earlier to follow her until she'd eventually, fortunately for him, stand on a scale? And the guy would make sure to look at the scale up close without her seeing him, so that he'd know what her weight was without her seeing him because he had an invisibility cloak? Or did they somehow get access to her medical records from her doctor? Because obviously too much sleeping gas would have killed her. And he's just a one-dimensional bad guy. But I guess he's smart enough to realize that if he killed her, then people would know where she last went and go after him. It would actually make more sense if he just sent nanomachines into her that can fly, and they would go into her brain and knock her out. He's already a mad scientist. That would be more believable than magical sleeping gas. That's really convenient for him. Sly asks Sally why she's in her thief outfit and packing up all her gear. She says she's out of time and has to get that emerald today. She's scared that if she comes back home too late, her friends would be so attached to the fake Sally that they might not even believe she's the real Sally and wouldn't take her back. It would suck if she was accused of being a robot. and put in prison. Eggman has made robots that look just like regular people after all. So that'd be easier to believe than believing she's the real Sally, considering how confusing it is that she wasn't roboticized. Sly finally hugs her. He says he knows what it's like to watch helplessly as bad things happen to his loved ones, and reassures her that they can go today. She finally hugs back. I'm always so surprised that she's on good terms with him. She gets along better with the thief than with Sonic. That's something I always thought about when they were interacting with each other. Sly at least warned Bentley that they were going early, but they've still got no backup for this. Sally feels refreshed and ready for anything already, because Sly was really good at making her feel better, and Sly can't even see any patrol guards here. Sally wonders if this is a trap, and they see Carmelita passed out in front of the Emerald. The door closes, and despite Sly showing concern for her, she wants to arrest him when she wakes up in his arms. It's not like he's a murderer. It's not like her parents were killed by thieves, were they? That would make her make more sense. Then the Emerald sinks beneath the floor. The floor opens up. Sly then gets horrified at seeing someone and says that it can't be. But it's not Penelope or anything. It's right after Sly too. So instead he's just reacting to seeing some bad guy whose only personality is that he's a bad guy, so I don't care about him. I have no idea why he has this much dialogue. He's not a person. He gets threatened with a giant robot, and Sally says that it's finally starting to feel like home. Sly's upset and asks what precious thing the bad guy is going to take away from him this time. Sally has to push him out of the way of a laser. Sly's upset that Clockwork's back already. Sally snaps him out of it by headbutting him. That's kind of extreme. Her head would hurt. Completely ignoring that, she talks a lot to him to remotivate him, while I'm just wondering why they aren't being attacked by the robot. Instead, it's politely waiting for her to finish giving him a pep talk. I thought it would be more dangerous than that. I get why he'd be upset at seeing him again, but it's so boring. Sally says she knows how it feels to think you've beaten your greatest enemy and then turn out to be wrong, but says he needs to be there to protect his loved ones. She's technically wrong though, because Robotnik isn't the same person as Robotnik Prime, and also it was Snively who beat Robotnik Prime. But she did think she had beaten Eggman when he went insane just to turn out to be wrong. But it was really Sonic who beat him, so she only knows how it feels indirectly. She doesn't know how it feels as much as Sly does. Sly admits Sally's right and apologizes about that shameful display. His words. And Carmelita says Clockwork started charging up for another attack, so they need a plan. We should have been told that it started charging up again the second Sly was pushed away from the laser. Then it would make sense that he's been doing nothing the whole time. Even then, you'd think the robot will be trying to fly into them and hit them physically, not just attack with the laser. Is it really so lame that it can't move at all? Because it can fly. I wish Sly was written to just whisper the plan, and then we could see it happen. Instead, he bores me to death with dialogue while nothing's happening. It was smart of him to have Sally have a cane she could use to attack with just in case. It's hard for me to be interested in this fight scene. I mean, I doubt any of the characters will even get injured. So Carmelita acts as bait for the laser and dodges it, and says that it's being fired in shorter intervals as time goes on. Why wasn't it always doing that? I guess Sly has super strength if he thinks that bashing a robot with a cane would damage it. He realizes there's a beak laser that the robot has now, and Sally realizes that he can't dodge that when he's in the air. She saves him again, and he thanks her, and she thanks him for the cane, which she had creatively used to fling herself over to him. The robot starts flying, I guess using the magic of the Chaos Emerald to defy gravity despite its high weight. And it's said that they'll have to use the pipe's scenery to reach him. Eventually, they get on top of the robot and take out key gears in his wings so he can't flap them anymore. Maybe the flapping powers anti-gravity generators, or a super magnet. And they jump off, and Sly grabs Sally and saves her while hanging from a rope. Sally wants to get the emerald dug out from that junk heap, and Carmelita says that to celebrate the victory, she won't try to arrest them today. That's very surprising for her. The bad guy gets feedback from his mental link with his robot. And because of the emerald somehow, and it reacting to the robot's hate chip, he loses any personality he had, and ends up only being able to say he wants to kill Cooper. I wish he was always like this, because then he wouldn't be talking so much and boring the hell out of me. This portrayal of him, on the other hand, is much more concise and self-aware.